Zhen is a polyglot and entrepreneur dedicated to helping youth better express themselves and develop their own initiatives. Since 2016, Kevin has helped more than 300 plus students gain acceptances into every top 20 college, ranging from Stanford to UAV to Carnegie Mellon. He also loves teaching creative nonfiction, flash fiction, and poetry. In total, his students have won more than 300 plus writing awards, ranging from the John Locke analytical essays to New York Times contests and Scholastic Gold Keys for humor. Sci-Fi and Memoirs. When he's not teaching or editing essays, he loves to break dance and organize dance workshops for his local community to celebrate hip-hop culture. Please come to the stage? No,
Welcome.
Either here. Please welcome Kevin. Alright guys, thank you so much for having me. It feels like, it feels like just yesterday I was in your shoes, but it's been 10 years now. I'll show some photos from back in the day. Was here at St. Andrews 3 years ago as well. And give a quick little intro about who I am and what I like to do. So that was me giving another talk at GCI a while back. This was me last time I was at St. Andrews with the other TAs. Up top, that's me and my beautiful wife, Ingra. We got married in November. Thank you. She's in the back over there. And over here, there's a little photo. This is like literally right outside my home in Miami, where I was born and raised. I'm holding a little YouTube logo. I make a lot of content. And that's me in New York, hitting an air chair. That move took me like a year and a half to learn, so long. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I also am a polyglot, as Liam mentioned. So I speak English, Spanish, Cantonese, Mandarin, and Portuguese. Thank you. All right. So today, I wanted to walk you guys through a little bit of my journey. It's been definitely a winding road. And here are some of the points that I want to get across. I'll tell you guys all about my GSP, my global service project. We'll get to that in a minute, but this is kind of a little bit of a preview. And we'll also talk a little bit about some principles. So I've had my, I guess you could say, done my rounds around entrepreneurship. And currently, the business that I run, Elevated, is my second business. Before that, it was formerly known as Zen, but I thought that was a little too egotistical, so we changed the name. And then before that, I ran this food tech startup, which is just an absolute circus of a story. Can't wait to share that with you guys. All right. So this was me, literally when I was your guys' age, in the year 2015. That's Sydney over there, actually. And we were at, yeah, round of applause for Sydney. So back then, we also did some, outside the classroom bonding. We're in a spot called Thompson Island, I believe. And I have just always loved to travel. That second photo there, that's me studying Spanish in the University of Salamanca. One of the biggest, quick aside, but one of the biggest tips I can recommend to you guys is keep doing these programs, man. Like, there's going to be so many of them over the next 4 or 5 years, and a lot of times once you get to college, they'll pay for you to travel. So definitely take advantage of that. That's actually how I met Ingra, too. I was traveling abroad in Argentina, and we met in northern Argentina amongst these like salt flats and alpacas. So that's also how I learned Spanish. And then over here, this is me frying rice in my parents' Chinese restaurant. A lot of what I do goes back to those days. And to this day, this is the hardest job I have ever worked. And that's literally what I did in one summer. First, I hit up GCI. First, I went to Spain. Then I went to GCI. I actually arrived a little bit late. And then I went home and worked and ended up writing my college application essay about this experience and got into Yale. And I'll tell you more about the entrepreneurship and the kind of service projects I did over there. So yeah, this was 3 years ago in St. Andrews. And that's me over here with the fellows. I was in the airport many times, driving back and forth, picking up fellows. So I've been in the TA's shoes. I've been in the fellows' shoes, just haven't been in Mr. Breemiller's shoes. I'm not ready for that level of responsibility. So I like coming and just giving talks and sharing what I know with you guys. Alrighty. So this is the current business that I work on. It's called the Elevated School. And a lot of what we do is focused on helping kids tell better stories so that they can unlock better opportunities. So it all started off with teaching middle schoolers when I was in high school and college. And then those guys ended up getting a little bit older and they needed help applying to college. And it wasn't really about getting into a college per se, but so many students just had so much pain and struggle with starting the essay writing process and how to articulate themselves in a really neat way. These days, this is a lot of what we do, but it's really not the only thing we do, and I'm happy to tell you guys more about the business in a little bit. So, yeah, probably my pride and joy is running this YouTube channel. It has been a long journey. I started making videos 5 years ago in 2020 in my parents' home. And we just hit 50,000 subscribers. This was a screenshot from a few days ago, which is really exciting. Thank you. And yeah, I really, really feel like this is something that I would be thrilled to do for the next 5, 10 years of my life, mainly because we get just so many comments like this. It's a little small, so I'll read it. It says, "Thank you so much, Kevin. I've watched hundreds of your videos and shorts over the last few months, and I have to say that nothing was clearer than those videos in understanding the U.S. college admission process. As an international South Asian, low-income student whose dream is sky-touching but resources are limited, these free tips have helped a lot. Thanks again." So thank you to the founders of YouTube for just letting us share these resources with lots of folks. Here's another one. "I've watched some scholarship essay videos for inspiration, but yours is the most clear and insightful of them all. Besides, your gestures and the cute little penguin stickers just make watching the videos so much more fun. There's so many gestures you use them all purposefully. If someone asks for a recommendation, I'll recommend yours. Thanks, Kevin." And this one says, "Thanks so much for your advice. You helped me get a full ride to Duke. I'm so excited for the next 4 years. Big leap forward and changed my life completely." Okay, but we're going to take a step back and rewind. And this is me, Kevin, Chicken Nugget Kevin, when I was 10 years old. I grew up in Miami, Florida. I was born and raised there. Went to public school, did the IB curriculum, so I started learning Spanish. There weren't a lot of Asian people in Miami, but my parents are Cantonese, so they're from southern China, and it's really hot there. They love like the humidity. Basically, it's like a swamp. So first they came to America, and they came to New York, and they're like, it is way too cold here. And they're like, what is this most swamp-like environment we can find in America? And they went down to Miami, where I was born and raised. I have an older sister, too. She's 13 years older. She was born in China, and she is a family attorney. She's kind of been like my second mom in this whole process. So yes, come from humble roots. And after that, I somehow slipped through the cracks and made it to Exeter, which was a complete 180. Freezing cold, literally 100 degrees to 0 degrees. I was doing it backwards. I spend my summer in Florida and my winters in New Hampshire. And I missed a lot of classes because it was so cold and I couldn't get up on time. So yeah, that's a problem. But there I met Yumi's son, Hiro. We've been friends now for 10 plus years. And his mom was telling me, he was telling me all about his mom's cool new program. And I figured I might give it a shot and apply. And that's how I ended up at GCI. So back in those days, it was essentially we had 3 buckets. We had education, environment, and poverty. And so I chose education to focus on for my GSP. Specifically, once you picked a bucket or category, there were a bunch of smaller questions. And the question that I was very interested in answering is how can we promote more opportunities for creative education at a place like Exeter, which sometimes is kind of known for being very academically rigorous, and kids are really trying to prioritize things that might look nice on a resume or activities list. But taking a step away from all that, I wanted to give folks an opportunity for expression. And so I launched this exhibition, and it was geared towards answering this question: what is it like to be blank at Exeter? So you can see some of it's a little hard to see, but some people put, what is it like to be a Democrat at Exeter? What is it like to be a friend, Muslim, head of the Republican Club, or Southern at Exeter? And this exhibition was quite stressful, and it took a lot of time. And what I want to help you guys understand today is actually how to remove a lot of the stress from the process. And if I had to do this project all over again, what I would do differently. But let me just pause for some water. So I was freaking out because for this exhibition to be successful, I needed a lot of submissions. And this basically ended up being Kevin calling up his friends, every favor that I could. Please, please, please submit to my exhibition. What can we do to promote submissions? My fear was that we would get 0 submissions and that we would get 0 people showing up. And that, I think, is one of the biggest stressors, was one of the biggest stressors for my GSP. It turned out to be okay, and we got a lot of artwork. There were actually a few different sections of the exhibition, which was really neat. And instead of asking people to create all kinds of new art, which this goes to one of the tactics that I want to talk about with your GSP, how can you make it as easy as possible for people to help you, for people to join your initiative? And in this case, rather than asking people, hey, you have to create something totally new for this, I would ask art teachers, hey, is there a way that some of the material that's being used in these art classes could feature in the exhibition? Or I would ask students, hey, you guys have written all these amazing stories for English class, and sometimes the only people that see that are the folks, like the 10 people, 15 people in your class and your teacher. Like, what if we printed out some of those stories that were similar to this theme, and we featured that here as well? And so in that way, we were able to get more submissions. And then there were certain just events that we would do. Over here, does it show on the screen? Yeah. We would just interview and take photos of students in the class and then just ask them this question. And then they would respond for a couple minutes, and we ended up printing out those photos. These are not like high-res, beautiful, 4K H. These were printed out on the school printer. And then we also printed out basically their quotes, and we put it up over here. Now, something really, really remarkable happened, which is kind of a funny story. So I ended up organizing this initiative with 2 other students, a dear friend, Pranay, and another amazing girl named Carissa. So Carissa and I were actually dating at the time, and we broke up that year. And then we didn't really talk, we kind of just kept our distance, kept our thing. She's a really great person. And what ended up happening was the year later, she and a few other students loved the exhibition so much that they continued doing it. And they created a social media page. And in fact, they actually also developed a performing arts component. So Pranay and I were at university at this time, and we had no idea any of this was happening. And we were scrolling through Instagram one day, and we just saw this social media page and this exhibition that was happening again. They turned it into a club. There was some people were talking about, there were some like leadership components. And so this is just nothing I could have ever anticipated. This was not part of the business plan. This was not part of our GSP long-term, 2, 3, 5-year projections. But it was just something so beautiful that happened. So going back to these tactics, I remember being very, very stressed out about all the things that needed to get done with the GSP. And it just felt like there was a running laundry list of 50 or 100 tasks that I had made up. I needed to print this, and I needed to send emails to people, and I needed to market the initiative, and I needed to find a space. And I think that one of the most powerful things you can do is write down all the tasks you can think of and start crossing out 80% of them. And see, like, if this 20% is true, then the event will happen, the project will be successful, it will come to fruition. So essentially for me, I narrowed it down to 3 things, which honestly turned into 2 things. The first was finding a space, which was one of the easiest tasks because there was a lady working in the art gallery at Exeter, and she was thrilled. She was even more excited about the idea sometimes than I felt I was. And so at first we considered all these different venues, and I remember being so sad that it wasn't in the near the assembly hall where it would get a lot of traffic. We ended up tucking it into this basement. But a lot of people passed through that basement, and I ended up really worrying about nothing. The second challenge was submissions. So as I was mentioning, I was like, I needed all these submissions, and I put it in my head that we needed 50 pieces of artwork in order for it to be successful. But I think that once you scale it back and you really take a step back, and you redefine success also, I was thinking to myself, I remember Yumi asking me, what would it take for this project to be successful? And I did some thinking, and I said, if one person walks away from this exhibit with a new perspective and they said, I'd never known what it felt like to be black at Exeter, or what it felt like to be low income or Muslim, then this project would be a success. And I think that, you guys are now in this crazy, hairy, ambitious stage, and it can get very, very easy to kind of get caught up in the clouds. But honing it down and making the project impossible to fail by redefining success as I changed one person's mind, right? I impacted one person. And this concept of one person is going to come back again and again and again, as I'll explain in some of the future endeavors. And then finally, I was super nervous about the actual day of the event. Would people even show up? How can I get people to attend? And that's where I got a little bit crafty, a little bit clever. And I noticed, one critique of boarding school is sometimes we eat the same thing over and over again. And there was one student in my class who was really good at baking desserts, and in particular, making this like monkey bread. He had like a huge waiting list because people wanted to buy his baked goods. And so we were both class representatives, and I asked him for this favor. And I think GCI gave me a little bit of money, and I spent it all on monkey bread. And I was like, please, we need to get like great food, pizza, bread. And I kept telling everyone that there would be a bunch of food, and it worked. So this ended up being a really massive event where several hundred people showed up, 300-400 people, which the hallway was packed. We couldn't even like move. And this is a big deal because Exeter really only has about 1,000 people. So it was like 30-40% of the school coming to this one event, which completely blew my mind. And though they came for the monkey bread and the pizza initially, they stayed for a really long time. And the really neat thing was that the exhibition would be up for weeks. And I remember just walking through that basement tunnel, and there would be people just like standing there and staring at like the exhibition. And that left such an impression on me. Like I would be watching them, watching the art, in like the corner, and just feeling really, really proud and happy. So that is how I would recommend getting started. And truly getting started is the hardest part. Once this ball gets rolling, so many other doors will open. Your entire conception of your identity will change as well. And I know some of you guys are thinking about like really big scale projects. And the way you can almost think about it is to create one milestone that is so small and to give yourself that, I did this, I have a box checked. In fact, if I were to do it all over again, I think I would create like almost a super duper mini exhibition and work on it for 5 hours, 10 hours, and take photos of like 3 friends in the dorm, ask them this question, post it, and then start showing it to people. And I could get that done in less than 5 hours, less than 10 hours in one weekend. And so once you create that, you scale down your project in a way that is, again, impossible to fail, you start to develop a lot of momentum and a lot of faith. And I think that sometimes young entrepreneurs, they get kind of stuck in this zone where they think they need to have this like grand event in order to be successful, or there's just like a really big, scary goal, which again is great for the long term. But the reality is that you guys are all full-time students, and you guys are going to be entering your senior year or your junior year, and that was like probably the hardest years of my life. And so I would really recommend being kind to yourself and creating this kind of leeway by downsizing the project. And once you are able to hit that, then you can continue building and continue building. And so I have coached many, many young entrepreneurs. I've run incubators through my business. I've helped them start passion projects that turned into national nonprofits. And I always recommend one student, Shams. He was a GCI fellow a few years ago. And he started by teaching Scratch to middle schoolers in his local library. And he literally began with 2 people, like his cousin and his cousin's like friend. And he would just meet with them on Discord online, and that's how he got started. And then it grew, and it grew. And I just told them every month, just try to double it, just try to double it, just try to double it. And it grew into 40, 50 people meeting in the library during the summer. And that's oftentimes how it begins. Okay, so. I graduated from Exeter and somehow managed to slip through the cracks again, where I ended up at Yale. And at Yale, I really didn't do that much. I was involved in 3 things. The first was breakdance, and really, really close group. Again, breakdancing doesn't really do much for your resume, and it's very painful and hard, and so very few people do it. But the people who do it are just so authentic and fun. And it ended up being one of the best decisions of my life because that's where I met my co-founder, Jeff. And also, I lived with these guys while at Yale, which was really, really fun. And then I did some Model UN, international relations. This was also, it was actually very, very entrepreneurial because we were organizing an event across the world for high schoolers in Taiwan. So we spent an entire year planning this like $100,000, $200,000 conference for them. And that conference actually didn't make money. Like we would charge the students and then it would cover all the costs and we'd break even. And the goal wasn't to turn a profit. It was just to make the project sustainable and continue providing educational opportunities to Taiwanese students, who had never, very few of them actually get to debate these types of issues in English, which was really exciting to them. And then the third thing that I did was this food tech startup called HomeCooked, which I'll get to. And then actually the last thing I did was this secret society at Yale. And I'll just give a quick rundown, but there's 3 types of societies. There's like debate societies, party societies, which are exactly what they sound like, and then bio societies, which is the one I was a part of, where you get to tell your life story to everyone in the society. And that's the secret part. We just don't share our bios with folks outside of the society. Okay, so while at Yale, I kept getting thrust into some of these entrepreneurial opportunities. Again, I was kind of like not an entrepreneurship by decision. Things just kept flying at me, and somehow I couldn't really dodge them. And so one of the guys from Yale was graduating, and he was in the same dorm as me, and he said, Kev, every year we throw this sick party, this Yale hip-hop block party. And you know what, man? I'm leaving, and I would love for you to run it. And I was like, I'm not so sure. And he's like, great, I've already kind of like gotten the ball rolling. Here's all the paperwork you need to do. And so I was like, all right. I ended up taking over the mantle and learned so much, too. This was a really, really wonderful event because it wasn't just with the Yale community, but we would invite New Haven local dancers. And so people had never seen them before, and it was just a really fresh exchange. And they were way better dancers than us, like so much better, no competition. And then we would also invite dancers from outside the state. So we got really, really close with the Princeton guys, and they would come all the time to this event. And then we would, like sardines, like 20 of us would be in the same apartment, and we would like just dance all night, and then we would just like sleep for a few hours, and then they would go back. So it was a really, really neat event. And this is another thing that I would encourage you guys to think about, which is that to an extent, your GSP doesn't have to be created from thin air. It doesn't have to be nothing. You can take over an existing initiative and do it well, do it even better. And there's no shame in that. In fact, this is a model that I have used again and again, and it works wonders. And I'll talk a little bit more about that too. Okay. Now this was a real beast. So the last time I came to GCI, I actually centered my talk around HomeCooked. Was really, really passionate about that, had a lot of faith in the company. But things really, let's just say, poop hit the fan, and I'll tell you guys all about that. And when it came to HomeCooked, HomeCooked is a social dining app that lets you book home-cooked meals made by people in your neighborhood. But instead of delivery or takeout, you would actually go to their home, sit down, and eat with them. And so the goal was to not just fight hunger, but honestly fight this epidemic of loneliness. So on paper, it sounds amazing. And trust me, I have done this pitch 100 times. I kid you not. When we were at Yale, over a 400-day period, we applied to 100 business competitions, over 100. Some were in Switzerland, some were in Rhode Island, some were in Massachusetts, some were in New York. And we kept applying, and eventually we started winning a few. In total, we won about 10 out of 100. And really, some of these competitions, they give you like tens of thousands of dollars in funding, in non-equity grant funding. And honestly, we had some decent traction. We ran about 50, 60 events in New Haven, and some of the events were hosted by graduate students. Some of the events, actually, New Haven gets its name, New Haven, because it's a haven for refugees. And even during the 2020s or the 20-teens, when I was at college, there were a lot of refugees coming from Afghanistan, coming from Syria, and so they would host these meals and experiences as well. Okay, and yeah, one of our biggest breaks was when we won Startup Columbia for 20,000. So this was a huge, huge win. But it turned out to be kind of a curse. However, essentially, the GSP was one of the initial kind of moments that got the ball rolling in this big extended 10-year journey of entrepreneurship. First with the exhibition over here, and I started getting very good at organizing events. I also organized this hip hop showcase at Exeter, which also helped me gain a lot of skills when it came to the block party at Yale. And then I did HomeCooked. The craziest thing about HomeCooked is, again, I did not want to be involved, guys. I was like, please, leave me out of this. However, a friend from high school, he came to Yale, and he pitched me this beautiful idea that I just told you guys about. And he was like, what do you think? I've already hosted a few events. He was just in town for like a squash tournament, but he goes to Chicago. And I was like, bro, I think this is one of the silliest ideas I have ever heard. Like, please leave me out of this. What happens if somebody chokes on a chicken bone? You know, food regulation issues. We're gonna get sued. Would people even pay for this? How are we gonna make money? Like, we make like $1 per meal. How many meals do we have to sell before we can support ourselves? And he's like, I hear you, I hear you, I hear you. I signed you up for a business competition the next day. And then he left. And then so I was in front of this crowd and pitching HomeCooked as a concept to the Yale entrepreneurial community, and they loved it. And they were like, you have to pursue this. This is so interesting. And so I spent basically the next year a year and a half of my life working super duper hard on HomeCooked, but it didn't quite pan out. And then I took a break from entrepreneurship, and 2020 happened. Okay, so let me get into the HomeCooked drama. I need to sit down for this. This is crazy. Give me a second. You guys still see me? Okay, the year is 2019, and we just won 2 really, really big competitions. One was the Columbia Venture Competition, Startup Columbia, and another one was the Yale Summer Fellowship. However, there were some small problems. So we had been told by some other folks in the entrepreneurial community from Yale, from Exeter, you can go around and compete. You know, you can use your idea and compete at, this other university startup competition, UPenn's or Tufts, or, all these universities have competitions. And so we did do that. And they did it the year before, 2 years before, and just absolutely swept and dominated and won a lot of funding. So we did the same thing. We kind of followed in their footsteps. However, there was one small detail. When we applied for the Startup Columbia one, I wasn't there. I was busy on campus organizing many meals and trying to get people involved. So my co-founder over here was with Sean, and they pitched HomeCooked. And somehow during the process, they asked Sean, hey, Sean, are you, just double checking, are you a co-founder of HomeCooked? Because you need to be a co-founder in order to be eligible for this competition. And Sean really quickly was like, yes, of course. So fast forward, a few weeks later, we win the whole thing. We win first place. And they're like, amazing. Please show us your articles of incorporation that prove Sean is a co-founder of HomeCooked. And this, out of 120 business competitions, this is the only time we were ever asked this. Usually they just cut you a check, and you're good to go. And we were like, so actually, Sean's not a co-founder. And then things got really hairy, and they threatened to kick Sean out of Columbia for lying. And we were like, okay, let's just take a few steps back here and not do that. We will give up all the money. We'll pretend, we were never here, and please just take it all back. But the plot thickens. So we had already used this money to hire people. Actually, I ended up hiring one of my best friends who's over here, and also now a successful entrepreneur. And so we paid them money that we didn't have, and now our company wasn't making any revenue, and we were quite in a pickle. So here's what ended up happening during that summer. I woke up at 8 a.m. and would work on HomeCooked like 7 days a week from basically 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. I would cook for our team of 6, and then starting at 8 p.m., I would tutor, and I would work for another company so that I could pay our interns the money that we said we would pay them. And I also borrowed money from my breakdance friends, and it was like this is actually the only time I've ever been in debt in my life. And I went to Exeter and Yale on full financial aid. My parents actually got hit really, really hard by the 2008 recession and have been in debt for actually since I was 13. So it's been 13 years. And this year, by the grace of God, we will be debt-free. but I'll talk about that in a second. Thanks. This was the most miserable summer of my entire life. I had never worked so hard. I was sprouting white hairs. I was sleeping on the floor with my co-founder so that our interns would get real beds. And my co-founder and I would just fight like two cats in a cage. And eventually I drew a line in the sand and I said, if we don't hit this milestone, this number of meals, this amount of revenue by August 1st, I have to call it quits. Thank goodness, another entrepreneur mentor of mine told me to do that. And I'm really, really glad I was able to just draw a line there. But I would after teaching, it would be 11 p.m., 12 a.m., and I would just go to the rooftop and I would just cry. And my intern, my best friend, he found me one day and he was like, hey, what are you doing up here? And I was just doing my best to protect him from all the drama. And he said to me, hey man, I'm not just your intern, I'm your best friend and your problems are my problems. So that ended up helping a lot, and it was a really, really long, stressful summer. And honestly, looking back on it now, thank goodness all that happened when I was 19. I learned every mistake in the book, from choosing the right co-founder, to marketing, to hiring, to business model, everything. And the second time I dove into entrepreneurship, I was like, this is never happening again. And I'm just so grateful that I learned those lessons, again, when I was 19 instead of 29 or 39, when I had a family to support. And if any of you guys are very serious about entrepreneurship, I cannot stress enough just how amazing it is to try and start a business while you're in high school or in college. It gets a lot trickier once you graduate. And plus, there's a lot of resources and money if you do it correctly for you guys. So that was the home-cooked drama in a nutshell. I could talk about it for hours, but we'll move on for now. Okay, in 2020, I had a new set of problems, which was that I went back home for spring break, and Yale was like, don't come back, because COVID was in full swing. So I finished my degree online, and around this time, my parents, as I mentioned, are restaurant owners, and they actually ended up declaring bankruptcy on the restaurants we owned actually a little bit before this, in 2017, which was, again, a great move. My dad had all this misinformation, and he thought that he would go to jail if he declared bankruptcy, because that sometimes happens to people in China, but in America, even Trump has declared bankruptcy. So it's okay, and you don't go to jail. At any rate, they were working at these two different restaurants, and because of COVID, all the restaurants closed. So they were both out of a job, and they had no income. And so again, I just couldn't keep dodging these entrepreneurial bullets, and I applied for over 100, 200 jobs, guys. I was on LinkedIn. Even my friends who had a job offer, their start date got pushed back, or their offer just completely vanished and was rescinded because of COVID. And at this point, I was like, well, what skills do I have? How can I make money to support my family? And out of pure necessity, I started tutoring again. So I was working actually 3 or 4 different jobs, but tutoring ended up being one of the more lucrative ones and one that I just really enjoyed. So your boy was sitting in that little red chair and on Zoom 40, 50 hours a week and just teaching nonstop, doing everything I could to support my family. And this is my childhood bedroom. Again, I went to boarding school, I went to college. I hadn't been home in 8 or 9 years. And it was quite a throwback, to say the least, to be here. And I kept my room's a little messy, so I kept my Zoom background on with the palm tree. So what happened next? I ended up actually finding a decent amount of success with tutoring. And actually, there were highs and there were lows, and they're always mixed together. And I remember the tutoring business doing really, really well. And again, my goal was to support my family. So there was one time where it was getting very popular in China, for instance, and I was teaching these boot camps, and I was required to wake up at 7 or 8 a.m. for the Chinese students. And then one time, I hear kind of a fight breaking out of right over here in the hallway. And I just hear my parents arguing in very heated Cantonese. And I'm trying to pause the lesson, or at least go talk to them after the session is over. And during 2020, my parents got scammed. And I can't even blame them. It was this insane crypto scam. So this lady, this Chinese German lady, friended my mom on WeChat and spoke to her on WeChat every single day for 250 days and convinced my mom to download this app where she could trade some stocks and some crypto. And then my mom was actually trading on the app without using any money. Like, you just trade paper money, like fake money, and she was making a killing with the fake money. And then finally, this lady convinced her to put money in the app. And the moment it did, it just all vanished. So that was like $80,000 burst into flames. So here I am tutoring, and I just feel like I remember this story that my mom told me about. There's this monkey who keeps putting potatoes in his sack, and he's like traveling through the whole forest. Imagine there's potatoes in the forest, and he's putting it in his sack, but the sack has a hole. And by the end of his whole journey, he finds he has like 1 or 2 potatoes in his sack. And I was like, am I the fool here? Like, I feel like the monkey. Like, I'm the one trying to support my family. I have no debt. I'm trying to pay off their debt. And they get caught up in these kinds of like, storms. So it was a very difficult moment, to say the least. But I kept going. I just kept tutoring and kept tutoring. And one of the biggest lessons that I learned was about customers. And at HomeCooked, the reason the business died is because we had no customers. We had no sales. We had no revenue. We had no users. And so this was the problem that I was trying to solve. And I said, if I can guarantee that this business always has customers, we'll always be in business. So while all this is happening, I just basically doubled down and focused on the company, which was honestly amazing because I also was able to work remotely. And I made another really crazy move and ended up going to Brazil in 2021, like while COVID was really happening. I needed some space from the family and ended up going to Brazil and meeting Ingra, and things got better from there. All right, so one of the first principles that I really, really want to get across is about your first customer. And if you guys have one customer, one user, you are successful. It really begins with one person. And a lot of people want to think, like, how do I change the world? Rather than thinking about like changing the world and reaching millions of people, billions of people, I want you guys to think about it more like, how can I change this person's world? Like, even if it's just for a moment, even if it's just for an hour, even if it's just for a minute, how can I change this one person's world? And so this was kind of the way that I started thinking about my customers. And in the beginning, it was really focused on helping Chinese American students. I was just constantly working with some of these agencies, and a lot of the students were from this demographic, this background. Weirdly enough, I was working with this tutoring agency, and there were a bunch of Chinese American students in Alabama. So at one point, like 70% of my students were from the South, which was really interesting. And you guys were working on these user personas earlier today. And I can't stress just how important it is to understand like as much as you possibly can about your user. Like, I knew my customers' schedule. I knew what they ate and what they didn't like. I knew what activities they were involved in. I knew their aspirations. Sometimes they would call me because their parents were fighting. Like, I would entrench myself in their life and try to understand them to the best of my ability. And at the same time, there were 2 sets of customers. One is the student, and the other is the actual person paying me, which is their parents. So I was thinking to myself, how can I make these people super duper happy? And one thing that I realized, I was telling our group earlier, is that, like it or not, like Asian parents, man, they love awards. So I thought to myself, what can I do? What if my students won an award? How would that feel like to the parent? What would that feel like for the student? And so I started looking into some opportunities where they could actually apply for creative writing competitions. Another thing that I learned about this demographic is that Asian parents, teaching math, science, physics, chemistry, no problem. However, teaching English is actually a huge point of insecurity. And there are a lot of, even Chinese parents in China who pay a lot for English tutors. So I just came up with this big what if question. What if over the course of a year, some of our students could win prizes? And within this tutoring agency, none of the students had ever won a prize ever before. And so I started to develop a curriculum. And I stole from one of the best curriculums that I knew, Exeter's. And I was using these, I would show students a picture, and I would say, let's focus on showing, no telling. don't use is, don't use are, don't use the passive voice, don't use adverbs. I came up with some rules for them, some guidelines, and they ended up really, really enjoying this exercise. And I was like, okay, awesome. You've graduated from using like random pictures from the internet. I would use a lot of National Geographic pictures. Why don't you take a picture from your own life, right? And try writing about that. And so I started slowly, but certainly creating this kind of curriculum for them. And the goal was just, can we come up with a 500-word story, a 1,000-word story? And let's run it through a few different edits. A lot of students, sometimes they just finish writing a story, they put it to the side. I was like, no, let's keep refining this 3, 4, 5 drafts until it looks like something you would be proud to send to Scholastic or Scholastic would put on their website. And I also learned that a lot of writing competitions are so much easier than math competitions. I was like, oh my goodness, how many like Asian kids do you have to beat in order to get to like the top of the math level? But writing competitions are not like that. A lot of them will award the top 10% or top 20%, and in math, you basically get one shot. In writing, you can submit 5 stories, 10 stories, and so that's what we would do. I would help students not just write one idea, but work on 4 or 5. So long story short, they won a lot of prizes, and that's how the initial customer base grew. Then, after working at this tutoring agency for a while, during COVID 2020, I asked if I could step aside, take some of the old students and start my own agency. And I was pretty close with the founder, and she said, yes, you have my blessing. And again, I even helped the founder's son apply to Yale and get in. And I would do stuff like that for free, which brings me to this guy. So at Exeter, at our high school, there's like this group chat, specifically for Asian parents, for Chinese parents. And when people get a good result, they start talking. And so my mom was like, hey, you go to Yale, there's a lot of these kids who are trying to apply. In the spirit of non-civi, why don't you help them out, talk to them? And so I thought to myself, yeah, let me try that out. But let me give them really like everything I wish I knew, like the whole works. Let me meet with them for like 5, 10 hours. Let me meet with them like every couple of weeks and create a roadmap. Like, hey, here's point A, here's where you need to be, by the way, right? Like here's where I was at the end, and here is where you are now. Okay, cool. Let's start building and building and building. Maybe you need to take a look at this extracurricular, or wouldn't it be really cool if you tried this? So I did everything I could for this student. Like I rolled out the red carpet. This photo was taken at Yale, and he ended up living with me, with all my breakdance buddies at Yale. I just let him stay with me for free because he was doing research with the Yale professor. And I was like, dude, just come stay here. What are you doing? Stop paying rent. Come here. This guy, I didn't ask for this, but he got into Yale. And the moment he got into Yale, his mom went ham. She told everyone she knew. She was like, you need to follow this man, Kevin. He's like, he knows everything. And I kid you not, like she created a WeChat group. She started sending students my way, and I think we made our first $10,000 that way. Like during COVID, right around the time my parents got scammed. And she was sending me so many students, more than I knew what to do with. So it just goes to show, when I really think, especially in the beginning, like try to give your whole self to help one person, particularly the demographic that you guys are trying to help. And there's going to be a lot of assumptions, again, that you think you might understand, but may be debunked. In this scenario, I didn't understand actually just how intense of a problem this was, or how strongly, I guess you could say, the users felt about it. Now, the next principle that I want to talk about is this concept of 0 to 1 versus 1 to X. And this, I think, is one of the biggest myths in entrepreneurship, which is that you hear of Airbnb, you hear of like Tesla, and these really like sexy, big entrepreneurial companies. And sure, if you guys want to get to $1 billion, then it may help to invent like some new quantum chip. And that's going from 0 to 1. It is like a completely revolutionary shift, a paradigm shift, inventing electricity, something like that. But in fact, the majority of entrepreneurship doesn't really look like that. And I think that I was very much in the minority in college because at Yale, there are 6,000, 8,000 students. Do you guys know how many students do entrepreneurship? Less than 1%. There were less than 60 entrepreneurs there. Everyone wanted to be a banker, a consultant, even me. I was like, please, don't rope me into entrepreneurship. I just want to provide a stable income to my family. Leave me out of this. And I got yanked into entrepreneurship. Okay, then within the entrepreneurial circle, like most people are pursuing like these new ideas and trying to leverage these new technologies. And I decided to focus on a very boring, quote unquote, boring model, which is like, I'm a tutor, right? I teach writing. I help people apply to college. But I noticed that like a lot of, like we could do so much innovation within this field. As I was mentioning before, while I was kind of gaining more customers, another thing that I did was start a YouTube channel. And even that, I noticed that other people had started a YouTube channel related to college consulting, but there were very few of them. There were less than 10, and they didn't do it very well. So I was like, I feel like I could do this a little bit better. And that is how I focused on going from 1 to X. So I think like sometimes many Chinese companies get a bad rep for like stealing an existing business model. And there's honestly no shame in that, and delivering it to a new market. Like you're doing a lot of good if you can deliver clean energy, you're using the same technology, but you deliver it to a different country. And that is another thing that I would really encourage you guys, because back in the day, we had no GSP models, right? Like a lot of the GSPs that we did were really brand spanking new. And looking at it now, there's been over 100 projects, so many different fellows, and I would really encourage you guys to look at somebody who's already paved the path before you. I promise there's probably a fellow or a project that's really, really similar to the one that you've done. I think of David's project. So David was a TA when I was here as well, and he created like a shower for the homeless. And I was like, this would be an amazing idea in like 100 different countries, right? Like you don't need to reinvent the wheel, and you could take something that's already working and apply it in a new context, and it's still new to that extent. And so a lot of you guys are, maybe you feel a little paralyzed about how to start, and this again is another hack to lower the barrier to entry and make it easier for you guys to succeed. And then the last principle that I want to mention to you guys is that like you will fail. And honestly, I encourage you guys to fail as much as you can while you're young, because if you fail early, you fail fast, you fail often, you will learn fast, learn early, and learn often, so that you can in turn succeed early, succeed fast, and succeed often. So I think I'm nearing the end of my talk, but to give you guys a bit of context as to what we do today, Elevated started with creative writing, and I just really, really enjoy, more than the process of helping kids get into college, is just kind of helping them articulate this amazing story. And I still work with like many middle schoolers, and we work with all these different categories, sometimes science fiction or humor, and that doesn't feel like work to me. It just feels like I'm talking to like my younger cousin, and we're just like workshopping an idea together. What ended up happening too is I never, graduated from Yale and I was like, oh wow, my dream is to be a college consultant. What happened was a lot of these kids just got older, and they were like, hey, you helped us so much with writing. Now we're writing like one of the most important stories of our life, like this Common App essay, these supplementals. We feel so lost. Please help us. And then I just realized I kept saying the same thing over and over and over again. So I was like, well, why don't I make like a YouTube channel where I can cover all these topics, and that way I can say it once, and anyone everywhere, anyone anywhere can see this sort of content. And then, yeah, we feature a lot of our students' stories on a blog. And the really cool thing about this is that the students will say, I used to think that I was a math kid. I used to think that I was a STEM kid. And as soon as they win their first award and they get that validation, their whole mindset shifts. Now they say, like, I'm a writer. Like, that is an identity shift, right? And that has been one of the most, like, gratifying and remarkable parts of the job, especially helping them identify this early. My favorite demographic to work with are like 7th graders, 8th graders. I noticed the girls just like work way harder than the boys, but that's so. Today, this is our channel. This was made. I took this screenshot I think a week ago, and we've had several million views. But I feel like I'm really just getting started. Like my ambition is to grow the channel to hundreds of millions of views and dedicate the next like 5-10 years of my life to this. And I'm just really excited to see what happens next. I already get the feeling that many of our students they're getting into college, and I just want to, again, understand their journey in psychology. Like once you get into college, what's your next problem? Finding a job. So I'm trying to help students, I heard Zhang laughing, help them navigate this journey. And again, this element of storytelling. Like when you're in middle school, you can tell an awesome story, win a prize, and you change your identity. When you're in high school, you write an amazing story, and this can unlock, access to higher education. And when you're in college, when you tell a better story, this can help you access, an amazing first internship or job. And so I really think that it's a skill that just pays dividends for years, and it's just something that really excites me. Working at the company, again, it's all fully remote. So Ingrid and I, we've been traveling the world these past 6-7 months. We've been to, I think I have some photos here. Yeah, we've been to Singapore, we've been to Turkey, we've been to Chiang Mai in Thailand, that's Taipei 101. Over here, we were in Santorini. And so, like, there's this very famous parable, right, about this, this Chinese father and his son, and they have this horse. And one day, their horse runs off and brings back a second horse. And it's like, wow, everyone in the village is telling him, wow, you're so lucky. And he's like, well, we'll see. And then the wild horse breaks his son's leg. How many of you guys have heard this before? Yeah, okay, a few of you. Then everyone's in the village is like, wow, this wild horse broke your son's leg, you're so unlucky. And the old man's like, we'll see. Then the army comes and conscripts all the healthy men for war. And they're like, wow, your son is so lucky, he doesn't have to go to war. And he's like, we'll see. And the story goes on and on and on. And I look back at like these most challenging moments within entrepreneurship, and I can't say that they're like just like a horrible thing that's happened with no positive results. I think like time will tell, and it's also about kind of how you react instead of the actual incident itself. And the last thing that I really want to leave you guys with is your why. If you have a strong why, then you will overcome any how. And for me, the why was supporting my family and supporting myself. And there was that one leap of faith moment in 2020 where I basically like cut my safety net. And I told my family, hey, I really want to pursue this tutoring thing full time. And they were business owners too, and they gave me their support. I'm really, really happy and blessed for that. And I also saw a lot of the mistakes that my parents made with their business, their resistance to change. And yeah, this year, thanks to everyone's collective efforts, I don't have any debt. I graduated from Exeter debt-free. I graduated from Yale on full financial aid. In fact, I was so broke, they paid me to go there. And I was really lucky about that. Again, and that was because of my parents' financial situation. And I have some friends who are middle class and graduated with debt. At any rate, my parents had a lot of debt, and we have been like slowly paying it off collectively over the past 4 or 5 years. And so at the end of this year, yes, they'll be fully debt-free, and that's all thanks to, thank you. That's all thanks to entrepreneurship and really GCI and the GSP. Because before that, I never really viewed myself as an entrepreneur. My mom had always said, you might be good in business. And when I thought business, I thought of like working for someone else, working at a traditional company. In Chinese, we also have this concept of like the 铁饭碗, which is called the iron bowl. And we really, really value security. And yet at the same time, I have been taking this top value of security and freedom and trying to apply it to our business. And so this year, or last year, our business cracked over $1 million in revenue. And we make about like 40% profit. And then using that money, we have invested more than 100 grand into scholarship students. We helped students, we had a student who was captured by the Taliban, and we helped edit all his essays and consult with him. He got into Stanford for free. We have students who are homeschooled from Illinois, and we have students who are from California, low-income students like myself who attended boarding school, and we work with a lot of those students too. And so I'm just really, really grateful for the opportunities that were provided. I mean, I attended GCI also on aid, and so this is my way of giving back. And I just hope you guys found this story or journey a little bit helpful. And yeah, I'm always here to answer questions and support you guys in whatever way I can. So, thank you.
I am so excited to see, like, which of you, how many years has it been?
10?
Which of you will be back in 10 years? Like, I just got goosebumps, actually. Which of you will be back in 10 years to talk about your failures and your successes? It's going to be really cool. We have time for a couple questions. Does anybody have any from the whole gamut? You get like Kevin's whole life. Yeah, Jennifer, go ahead. And just ask your question nice and loud so that everyone can hear.
So first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for spending the time to give us this amazing presentation about your failures and also your success. I if I remember correctly. Like, what was the first event like, and like, how did you come up with that idea?
Okay, so I'll repeat the question. So how did I come up with the event idea for We All Bleed Red? What was that process like? Actually, this was, I kind of want to say a ripoff from our sister school, or our sibling school, Andover. So they had a project called Out of the Blue. And it was like, hey, if you really knew what it was like to be blank. But they did a completely different format. So they did a book, and they did like, everything was visual. They had a website for a little bit. And I thought, well, why don't we include a few different kinds of artwork? So also photography, some visual art, and that's kind of how we came up with the idea for the event. And then after that, the actual hosting the event, it was very dependent on picking a space and time. And then once those kind of details were secured, I was like, okay, wow, this event is happening, better get submissions. And then once we had a date, I could kind of work backwards too. I had a rough idea. We ended up hosting it in the winter, in like January or February. And then I knew, okay, we need submissions by this time. Okay, we need to start beginning the marketing by this time. Okay, how can I convince people to show up on this day, et cetera, et cetera. Does that kind of answer your question? Yeah, great question. Any other questions? Yes.
I was actually curious about what you did once the
Home cooked?
I forgot name cooked, right? Okay. So HomeCooked. How, like, when you said that you were doing the work and then at night you were working too. I was just wondering if the other people involved were doing the same as well, or was it just you just taking it all on?
The other guys also worked, but in different ways. And I think they just ended up working even harder on the company. And they didn't really have like side hustles like that. But I remember my co-founder, Eric, this man will just like outwork me every time. Like we would sit side by side, and he would code for like 16-hour days, even while I was tutoring. So we were all working, and I think it wasn't with this kind of relationship sort of stuff, it wasn't so obvious that like, oh, we should step aside, or oh, we should give up this concept, because we had a lot of traction. We were doing pretty well. We had customers. We were winning competitions. That being said, there were many, many red flags with my co-founder, and I wish I had been able to like identify those earlier. Yeah, long story short, they also worked. Oh wow, okay, suddenly 10 questions. Yes, I think you were first.
What would you say is like the main component for building something successful and long-lasting, like what you do?
What would I say is the main component for building something successful and long-lasting? The idea of building something long-lasting necessitates a bit more of, I would say, like a system. And even now today, the company would not exist if suddenly something happened to Kevin or my co-founder, Jeff. We have this conversation all the time. If like Kevin or Jeff are hit by a bus, the business would die. And so in order to build something really, really long-lasting, you have to essentially remove yourself from the equation. That is like one of the ultimate pinnacle forms of leadership. Like the organization will continue to exist and do really great things even without you there. That is like, there's many, many smaller intermediate steps in order to achieve that, but that's kind of what we're trying to build. That's what I kind of built on the media and the customer acquisition side. So even when I'm just like sleeping, we're getting customers because our media system is able to create content and draw in customers. But there's many different kinds of systems that we also build too. It's a complicated question. But I would also say so the early success is, and then the other elements is actually just a mindset element. And I would say like convincing yourself to work on it every day. Now, I think with a lot of entrepreneurship, like people just brute force it. They're just like, I'm gonna continue to do this no matter what. And the easier element that I found is to find like a lot of joy in it. So if you can convince yourself to love the process even more than the result, then you'll do even better. It's like the man who loves walking will walk more than the man with a destination. And so that's kind of what I've been trying to do. A lot of entrepreneurs quit because they just end up hating the grind. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. Thank you. I have one special treat for you guys, which is I have a lot of breakdance videos to share. I don't want to hurt myself, but I'll show you a video that I was doing earlier this morning, just in AGA, so you guys can see. Yeah, that was me. I was just dancing. Yeah, so I started in high school in New Hampshire somehow, and then I've just been sticking with it. So this is yeah, that was me in yeah, thanks. Okay, thanks guys. But I'll be around. I'll be here until Saturday, so please bother me with questions. You guys can email me. I'm just a message away. Thank you. Thanks guys so much.